Hello, welcome back to Fire Horizons Gaming. My name is Ben, and today we're going to continue on with Suzerain. So last time we left off, we went to the funeral of Bernard Circus, gave a nice eulogy, and followed that up with a very long meeting, discussing new trade deals, as well as the political situations with a number of our neighboring countries. So, it looks like might as well go and start off the newspaper here. We got 5 new articles. So the first one is from the Whole Sword Post. Emergency in Anarka, Mayor announces. Troubling news are coming from the mayor of Anarka, who reported that a state of chaos exists in the city and called an emergency directive, authorizing him to use his security powers. In an announcement, Mayor Lust said, "We are reporting 20 police officers heavily wounded, 2 police stations burned down, and several shot." Wait. Several police stations were shot? Whatever. The city is in a state of emergency. We're trying to restore order. The local gendarmerie began assisting the mayor after the emergency request was made. The armored units are now secured in critical junctions and key infrastructure like power stations, hospitals, and the municipality building. Local NFP leaders have announced that they will assist the local enforcement with the task of keeping the streets safe by reporting violent dissenters, a statement criticized by the local PFJP official. Alright, so the political unrest is just getting even more violent. Alright, moving on to the Lockhaven Times. Welfare issues of Narbel. Narbel, a city that was once an important trade stop for the Markian Empire, has been in a steep decline for the last decade. We have uncovered the hard truth from the residents themselves. K.A. 46, shepherd living near the Cavendier Mountains that did not wish to disclose his real name, has made shocking remarks about the city's and region's lack of healthcare services. He has waited almost 5 months just to get an appointment in the rural region. Another resident, a farmer, IY, 57, who also did not wish to disclose his name, is living near the outskirts of Narbel. His children, AY, 14, and VY, 16, have to use dangerous mountain paths to walk to the school located 2 kilometers away, even in the harshest seasons. Unrest continues. The unrest in the streets is continuing, and the tension between different groups has led to new clashes with hundreds wounded and sometimes several dead a week. Our reporters have interviewed dozens of protest leaders from the regional capitals, revealing different demands from the people. 3 subjects stand out: freedom of expression, democratic change, and economic security. On the other hand, many also went out to protest the worsened living conditions under the recession. Every third person our team has talked to mentioned the need for a strengthening of the political system that needs to open up to reflect different opinions. Our eyes on the ground witnessed both peaceful and violent acts. We saw bus stations destroyed, shops burned, people being carried to the hospitals and ambulances. There were also calm scenes where police forces allowed peaceful protesters from all sides of the political spectrum to make their voice heard and disperse. Certain cities like Anarka, Erzarin, and Arvery are much more damaged by the unrest. The overall momentum of the protest doesn't seem likely to stop soon. Alright, Radical says, "We need democracy. We have long demanded the expansion of our civil rights with reforms to modernize our nation. When the previous government blamed the Supreme Court for not allowing the reforms, the opposition was quick to point out the flaws within the Constitution and brought focus on reforming the governmental structures to open way for further civil reforms. Now the reformers have increased in number, and with the president who is seen as a symbol of change in office, we are waiting for results. Whether it is the leader of the opposition or our current president, somebody has to break the cycle and rewrite the Constitution made by Tarquin Sol. His cult of personality has shaped our current divided national spirit and must be broken. Will President Rain stand up to the establishment and listen to the people? We will see." And Geopolitico says Swordland condemns closure. The response to the Rumberg consulate closure in Lockhaven was quick. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent a strongly worded official diplomatic condemnation letter, accusing Rumberg of destabilizing Swordland and the surrounding region. Several nations made supporting statements for Swordland in the Alliance of Nations. It is clear that this letter is not just directed at Rumberg, but to all surrounding countries observing the serious situation. Alright. So, at least it showed some of our decisions from the last episode are already starting to come to fruition here. So, let's take a look at this report from Arvery here. A young Swords member claimed links to the government. A detained young Swords member in Arvery claimed that he has connections to the government. We've been investigating the truth of his claims, and we're not able to find any leads. Investigation ongoing. Nice, that's not potentially sketchy. Okay. Alright. Briefing on the results from the Reform Committee. White Room, Maroon Palace. I came a little early to the meeting room before anybody showed up. We had scheduled a meeting to discuss the progress of the Reform Committee regarding the new Constitution. I took a seat on the center chair in the vacant meeting room as I waited for them to show up. The reforms were slowly becoming the most significant expectation of my government. We would be changing Seoul's Constitution of 29. Most people nowadays blame the Constitution for the outstanding problems of the country. On the other hand, the reformists in the Assembly had been getting louder about their demands. What I knew for sure was that I needed to do something about this encroaching chaos before it swallowed me. Meanwhile, Lucien, Peter, and Nia had been leading the committee to prepare an initial draft for the constitutional amendments. I was intrigued to hear their results. There's a knock on the door. It was Lucien.
Good afternoon, sir.
Lucien arrived exactly in the hour mark again. His punctuality could almost be described as obsessive. Are you waiting behind the door to come at the exact second?
I'm sorry, sir.
Forget it. How are you today?
I'm good, Mr. President. Thanks for asking.
Took a seat on the table and took out a bunch of documents, spreading them on the long table.
We should begin the meeting as soon as Miss Morgana and Mr. Vice President arrive. We finally have some results from the Reform Committee.
How does it look?
Well, the situation is quite complicated, but I'm sure we will make it work, just like we accomplished many things before. We'll go over all the details regarding the new constitution in the meeting.
A few minutes later, Peter and Nia also arrived. After a short chat, everybody sat down and took out the notes. I knew it was going to be a long meeting. There's a lot of talk about the future of this process. Let us begin to tackle the points of contention. What was this lady's voice? I don't remember. That's fine, I'll just make it up.
Mr. President, our committee meetings were rather fruitful, and we already started working on the constitutional draft together with the reformists. They demanded a little too much, but I've had success with Friends Richter to create a realistic draft that could potentially go through the Supreme Court.
A little?
They demanded to write the whole Constitution. Their requests were definitely not outrageous, just not realistic in today's circumstances, just because it wouldn't pass the Assembly. Nonetheless, I'm glad we'll reach common ground already.
If we can reach an agreement with the reformists, we will be very strong in the Assembly to propose the change.
We reach a 2/3 majority in the Assembly?
If you can get Friends Richter to work with you on this, our only problem will be uniting our own party. We'll never be able to get NFP to work with us. We need the majority of our 130 seats in the Assembly to vote in favour. With BFJP's full support of 70 votes, we will easily surpass the needed 166. But it will be tough to unite the USP with all the divisive wings that have formed. You must make them follow you loyally.
We did it before for the elections. We can do it again. Alban Clavin and his reformist wing will be supporting you. You're already weighing heavily in the committee meetings. However, the Conservatives would be tough to break. The influence of Seoul is still living strong in the party. Do you think they can be persuaded? I'm not sure it's possible, but regardless of my opinion, we need to persuade most of them to support us for passing an amendment to the Constitution. There is only one person who is key to make them back us.
Gloria Tori. She's well respected by the Solists. She'll be our biggest obstacle in the Assembly, and her demands will be extensive. I also have reasons to think she might be in Orso's pocket. She'll be tough to break, but it will need her help to get the Conservative support.
Is it possible to pass through the Supreme Court?
They are the biggest obstacle. Even when we pass the Assembly, the Chief Justice will do his best to block our amendments. We need at least 6 of the 11 judges to vote for the proposal, and Mr. Hawker has enormous influence over the judges.
We should reach out to the judges in secret. Some of them might be willing to break rank to support us. They'll surely support a just cause for the country and its future. Lucien looks skeptical.
According to the Constitution, I'm a member of the Supreme Court, which means we already have one vote. 2 of the judges are friends of mine, and of similar opinion about the reforms. Consider them with me.
So we've only 3 votes out of 11?
3 votes, yes, but I believe that Judge Edmonds can be persuaded as well. She and 2 other judges, Mr. Dalton and Mr. Merton. They weren't really blinded by the Solus ideology. Yes, if those 3 don't seem to be working directly with Chief Justice Hawker, if we can get to Isabel Edmonds, we might get the 6 votes needed. That's our best bet.
What are the final demands?
We should run down each of the main demands of the committee and get your input first. Ms. Morgna can explain them further. We'll start with the first red line. The new constitution will fix the loopholes regarding the president's absolute veto powers.
Even though Mr. Richter puts on a whole show about why vetoes should completely be removed, the committee has almost unanimously agreed on fixing loopholes, thus limiting presidential vetoes. My suggestion is to add a clause detailing the methods the Assembly may override a veto with some sort of a supermajority. One person should never be able to block the rest.
Loopholes give the president too much power, which could be misused.
Whatever you decide, it's important to get a balanced picture. We will be making history by changing the 29th Constitution of Sol.
The second one is about the Judiciary. The new constitution will remove the Supreme Court's right to vote on legislation.
This is yet another point that was unanimously agreed on by all parties. Turkin Sol established this rule to protect the Suzerain Constitution. We all know most of the judges are still his pawns. Constitutional amendments will still be very difficult to accomplish with a reform like this, particularly because we will keep the 2/3 vote system to be able to propose a change. However, the Judiciary will not have the final say in the amendments.
I mean, this is already what our administration wanted to do.
Yes, this will ensure that there won't be another politically motivated Supreme Court. Apart from these 2 critical points, they have other major demands. We want to reform the appointment procedures of the ministers. Mr. Richter clarified that the Assembly should have a say in the formation of the Council Ministers. That is something that the majority in our party also supports. Well, Mr. Richter also talked about abolishing the Member of Honour rights of Turkin Sol. It gives him absolute immunity and makes him a permanent member of the Assembly. Well, that is a controversial one. I doubt the USP would like that.
Immunity of the justices, the impeachment of the president, limiting the power of the presidential decrees. All of this came up during the committee meetings.
Yes, the reformists expect big reforms, while a faction of the USP are not very keen on pushing changes that are too great. I'd say keeping everything in the middle ground is the safest bet. No need to agitate everyone too much.
I disagree. We should push for comprehensive reforms.
I'm with you on this, Mr. President. Well, regardless of what Mr. Rain decides, we'll need to work together to push this agenda.
Now we have a better picture of your intentions, sir. Now start reaching out to my contacts to make a draft that works for us.
Present your input to the committee. In a few months, you'll have the draft on your desk to make the final changes yourself.
I think this was yet another fruitful meeting, sir.
Your service is appreciated.
Thank you for the kind words, sir.
Hey, you've got an accent on. Yes, Mr. President.
I think this is where we're called, sir. Have a good day.
They left the room. Nice. Alright. So, it looks like we've got another report over here in Lockhaven. H3 construction plans started by Taurus. Taurus Holding has reported that preparatory work for the H3 highway has already started, including clearing land and demolishing buildings in the path of the future roadway. Construction of the highway will be starting in the next months, working west from Lockhaven. Nice. Alright. One more newspaper here from Radical. WPB protests electoral bill. Growing discontent over the past electoral campaign finance bill, which has excluded public funding for parties that aren't able to enter the Grand National Assembly, has reached a boiling point when all Workers' Party of Bludia officials and members went out in protests around the country. Strong voices of support came from the Labor Union of Sordlin and the People's Freedom and Justice Party, calling the bill unfair for most parties, attack on our democratic principles. The new bill means that the WPB lost half of their total party funding, and since they couldn't pass the high election threshold of 10%, entering the Assembly aren't eligible at all to receive any public election funding for the 1957 elections. The WPB leader said that the workers' struggle continues, and they are willing to explore other options to be able to represent the hundreds of thousands of people that voted for them. For now, the struggle continues. President Rain and the USP establishment are actively seeking to suppress the political representation in this country. Cool, I don't think that's what I'm doing at all, but I also don't really care what the Communist Party has to say here. Alright, meeting with Chief Justice Orso Hawker. The administration has been working day and night on the overwhelming amount of issues that were facing the country. The department sent several documents which required my signature so they could start working on the new decisions that were taken. After I signed dozens of them, I closed my eyes to relax for a minute. Another long day. Even though I really wished to leave the palace for the day, Lucien earlier told me that the Chief Justice wanted to speak to me. We planned to meet in my office in 30 minutes. I waited for him, wondering what subject he would raise. I poured some whiskey for myself and took a sip. It eased my mind a little. Suddenly, I heard a knock on the door. It was Lucien.
Good evening, sir.
I raised a glass of whiskey and gestured at Lucien. He sat on a chair near my desk.
I'm good, sir, but good to see you enjoying yourself. I'm sorry that I couldn't explain the situation to you in detail earlier, sir. The Chief Justice insisted on seeing you this evening. I do not know what he has to say, but it will probably be about the new Constitution. He will be coming shortly with Judge Mr. Garassi to the meeting. We shouldn't take them lightly.
I think he's here to test the waters.
I agree. They'll probably try to get you to their side. We should...
There were 3 knocks at the door. Lucien checked his watch. He looked rather worried. Olivia opened the doors. Chief Justice Orso Hawker and Judge Heron Garachi entered the room.
Good evening, Mr. President. It's great to see you.
Evening.
Terrible. I love it. Welcome, Justice Garachi and Chief Justice Hawker.
Good to see you indeed.
Orso gestured at the sofa in the office.
May I?
Please. We all took our seats on 2 opposite sofas and made ourselves comfortable. Orso glanced at the glass of whiskey.
Celebrating something, Mr. President?
Forgive me. Would you also like to have a drink?
No, thank you.
Me neither, thank you.
I'd like to stay as conscious and focused as I can.
How are your first couple of months, Mr. President? I hope you're faring well.
To be honest, it was a rough start.
I couldn't imagine, yet I think you're doing a good job so far. Considering all that's happening around us, with the shootings near the palace and soldiers on our borders...
He let out a deep sigh.
It is a troubling time.
We appreciate your concerns. So, you probably know why we are here.
Please enlighten us, Mr. Hawker.
We know you're working on a new constitution. The Supreme Court does not approve of this. With all due respect, the Constitution needs to be updated, sir. I am sure you are well aware of the public demand and our circumstances. Is that so? I see that you are the one who is not aware of our actual circumstances. You want to make a weaker constitution in the midst of problems from both inside and outside. Even if your proposal passes the Assembly, I will make sure it will not pass the Supreme Court. That much is clear.
So you came here to threaten us.
How is that a threat, Mr. President? I merely stated my position.
There is no threat here, Mr. President. Mr. President, you seem to be only partially informed about the current situation. Please let us explain the reasons of our stance.
Oh, please explain.
We are protecting the Constitution because it works, Mr. President. It is efficient and it gives you the authority to lead the nation with swift decisions. Sordland has more important problems and threats that we should face right now instead of nitpicking about some paragraphs of the Constitution. We have a potential war within our borders.
Orso signaled Heron with his hand to let him speak instead.
Mr. President, I know that you are a busy man, so I will make this quick. We all know that Swordlish security forces found stashes of Rumburgian weaponry in the hideouts of Bluish separatists. KA-74s are roaming inside Swordland at this moment. As much as Rumburg poses a direct threat, now it's clear that they are also intervening in our country and weaponizing our minorities against us. It's not unprecedented to think that the Blues will start the terror again with the new toys. Not to mention the fights that broke out between the left and right wing after the shooting of Bernard Circus. Communists are rising with the sports of United Contana. The chaos is imminent for Swordland. And sadly, we don't see this administration taking the necessary precautions. You said you would not focus on military during your term. Under current circumstances, that cannot be tolerated at any cost.
Mr. Hawker, the court has no jurisdiction over these matters.
Aren't we all part of the state, Mr. President? We are all responsible if Swordland fails to overcome these threats. But regardless of that, are you also aware that the on-Bluish separatists have direct connections with the Workers' Party of Bludia?
They claim otherwise.
They may claim they have no ties with the separatists, but most of the members used to be parts of them before they formed the Workers' Party of Bludia.
How about the name, Mr. President? If it's not the Workers' Party of Swordland, is it? As far as I'm aware, there's no nation called Bludia around here.
What is this all about? The only reason they are not in the assembly is because of the electoral threshold. They've gotten quite big. They are clearly getting outside help, and their connections to the paramilitary Bluish forces cannot be denied. And all of a sudden, the reformists are trying to decrease the electoral threshold so that the Bluish separatists can be legitimized in the assembly to achieve their aims of independence.
You really think that's Mr. Richter's intention?
I suspect his intentions are grander. But I wish the only issues were the Bluish terrorists in Rumburg.
The reformist suggested changes would also bring the communists who are backed by United Contana into the assembly. Do you see the pattern yet?
You're saying the reformists are working for the foreign powers?
Haven't you been briefed by your security team? Maybe you should suspect them as well.
We should take the necessary measures against communist and Bluish plots, as well as increasing our military budget against a possible conflict with Rumburg.
And of course not to fall into the traps of the reformists by listening to their demands. They are clearly plotting to weaken the president and our whole administration in order to exploit the situation.
Which brings us to some very important information that we have. It's definitely something you need to hear, and it can change absolutely everything. With all due respect, Mr. President, I think this is getting slightly ridiculous.
Just please explain, Mr. Hawker.
The person in question is Mr. Franz Richter himself, the leader of the reformists. We have enough information to infer that he has ties with Acacia. Acacia is aggressively growing their influence around the world, now with Mr. Richter coming up with these ridiculous demands for a new constitution amid a chaotic period in Soldan. All the pieces seem to fit perfectly. That's why the Supreme Court will be doing what it takes to stop these reforms and preserve the constitution. How would you know that Mr. Richter has ties to Acacia?
Mr. Glad, we all know he's been in Acacia many times because it's been documented. But what would you think if he's been making hidden flights to the country?
He was hiding his flights to Arcasia?
He was.
He has been spotted in a hotel in Arcasia last year, where they held the Conference on Economic Development of Volta Regions. Right around that time, he started to influence the masses into believing that our constitution is the reason for everything bad. His trip was not documented, nor was he an official guest of the conference. We believe Excuse me. Then he had a meeting with President Valka behind closed doors. I also have a couple more photos of him that were taken in Arcasia in different cities. One is from a couple months back. Again, none of it is documented. He also attended another event in Lesbia last week. The Arcasian Foreign Minister of Affairs was there too.
How can any of these be undocumented?
We don't know. Even if he used a private plane, we'd be able to get his information from the flights. That means he has people helping them from inside. Many Solus were already following his leads for quite some time, Mr. President. I cannot give away their identities, but I can give you the evidence.
He handed me a small file. It contained official documents from the Swordfish Border Guard with highlighted dates that show no trace of Franz Richter's name. There were clear photos of him that were taken at the conference in Arcasia, as well as remarks by Lesbian and Arcasian citizens who claimed to have seen him with Arcasian businessmen around the same dates. There's also an official transcript of one of his speeches where he claimed to be in Benfey on the dates of the conference in Arcasia where he was spotted. Lucian skimmed through the documents with skepticism, which slowly turned into surprise.
These seem to be real. Of course they are, Mr. Galad. These seem to suggest that Arcasia is behind the reformers. Their demands will only benefit Arcasia. They want us to have a weaker administration while we face all these threats. This is clearly a plot against Soldan. I bet Rumburg is part of their plan too. This cannot be a coincidence that they are weaponizing our minorities against us around the same time. Now you understand the reasons of our current stance, and also our suspicions against your advisors who have clearly not given you this vital information.
Lucian gave him a sharp look.
We appreciate the information, Mr. Hawker, but I advise against jumping to conclusions right away. We still need to check the information. There is not much to think or check. This is clearly an emergency. In such cases, the Constitution gives the President the right to use his emergency powers. If we work together, you can be sure that the Supreme Court will not block your declaration of emergency.
You want me to declare an emergency?
Of course, we cannot wait for the process of the Assembly to take care of these issues. You must exercise your presidential powers for a fast and effective solution. Which means you might need to suspend parts of the Constitution to give more authority to our security forces to deal with these issues. We must officially investigate Mr. Richter as well. You can devise a strong security decree if you can base it on the Articles 57 and 58, which gives the President the right to suspend parts of the Constitution to deal with national security threats. You can directly bypass the Assembly in such a situation. The only thing you need is the Supreme Court to allow the emergency to be declared, and you have our word on that.
Sir, I think this is going a bit too far. We shouldn't escalate things so fast.
Mr. President, why don't we talk in private? Only two of us. We can devise a plan together. I know how we can use the Constitution to our advantage. It'd be more effective if Mr. Galad and Mr. Garachi leave the room before we discuss it.
Sir, I advise against it. Look, I'm sorry. Regardless of our situation, I'll be proceeding with the reforms.
Even though you are aware of our national security threats?
You're making a big mistake, Mr. President. We will not allow you to succeed.
You are the ones who are making the mistake.
We will see, Mr. President. We will see. Have a good evening.
They both left the room without saying anything else.
That was not good. They clearly tried to threaten you.
You have to make sure our reforms pass the court.
Orso will be doing whatever it takes to damage you. We need to be careful.
There are still many old guard sympathizers in our party. We can't let them divide our party. And he will definitely try. After a short evaluation of the situation on our hands, Lucian left me in the presidential office. It was obvious that the old guards would be my main rivals in the near future. Alright. Now, one newspaper here. The Lockhaven Times. Hawker in Maroon Palace. Chief Justice Orso Hawker has been spotted entering the Maroon Palace. Our sources are intrigued by the timing of his visit that is happening right after the increased conversations around the so-called democratic reform. Historically, Mr. Hawker usually does not frequent the palace unless for official business, and this was certainly an unplanned visit. Clearly, there must be something he wants out of this. Our speculation is that this has something to do with the reforms. More to come on this later. Alright, and on that note, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it an episode here for today. Looks like we'll also be continuing on to the next churn here, so when we come back, we'll move on to the next part of the story here. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see y'all next time.